Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Some of Our Parts, the podcast where two friends talk about the movies that made us who we are. I'm Lindsay,
I'm Jim.
and this week it is Jim's pick. Jim, tell us what movie you picked.
Gosh, I don't know if anybody has ever seen this movie. Let me just put the title out there and hopefully someone will have heard of it. It's Raiders of the Lost Ark,
Oh, yes, a very, very small independent film, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yeah,
starring some unknown characters and actors and directed and produced by some unknown people in Hollywood.
yeah, just some randoms. Is his name Steve, maybe? Steven?
Steve and George. I
Yeah,
forgot. Yeah, something. Yeah, I think they did a couple of other things. I'm not sure. So
maybe. Yeah, the names sound vaguely familiar.
yeah, and then the guy that played, the lead character, he's been in a couple of other things, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So
a few. Well, we just so Raiders of the Lost Ark that came out in 1981. So did you see it in theaters? Set the stage. You when you first watched it, what was that like?
so I can still recall the advertisement for the movie in the
Mhm.
newspapers, and probably before your time when movies there used to be a page in the newspapers for movies,
Mhm.
and first you would just see the ads, and then it was just the title, and it was Raiders of the Lost Ark coming soon.
Mhm.
Well, no one knew what that was. No one had it wasn't like it is today where, the internet knew everything and people leak stuff and everything like that, but that was just the title. And then I didn't even know what that meant. Raiders of the Lost Ark of what? So, and then finally you started hearing snippets and everything. And then I could not wait to see this movie. So
Mhm.
when I found out, so of course I'd seen Star Wars and I'd seen Harrison Ford, and but when it came out, it had as it did on a lot of other people, but not just me. But I was in my mid 20s, still, kind of a romantic, and yes, there is a little bit of a theme from my last pick from Casablanca to this one. Yes, we're still in World War II, or right around there, and yes, there are Nazis. So, a common theme, but you have to remember when I was growing up, I saw a lot of those kind of movies on TV. So, but
Mhm.
back to Raiders, it was fabulous. And it started out, though, kind of slow. I mean, people talked about it, but it didn't have the big blockbuster opening. I think that back then that some movies did, but it grew, and it just one of those ones. And back then, movies stayed longer in the movie theaters. It
Mhm.
wasn't just there for a week or 2 weeks or whatever. They could stay there for a month or two
Yeah.
months. So, and this movie grew legs, as they say. So,
Mhm.
and I remember actually seeing it. I know I saw it at least twice in its original run at the movie theater because I enjoyed it so much the first time, and I wanted to go back and see it again because I figured there might be things that I missed, which there were,
Mhm.
and it was just one of those movies that just after I watched it, after you just had a good feeling. I mean, you felt like you were on an adventure. It didn't have a big moral to the story or anything like that, but there were, some things about, how you should, treat antiquities and so on and so forth,
Mhm.
or but to me, the two of the biggest takeaways were, one, whether people realize it or not, maybe they don't anymore, but it influenced men's fashion for a long, long time.
Mhm. Mhm.
Brought back that look of the fedora and the, from the 40s and so on and so forth. And then
Mhm.
um, it spawned a whole franchise, which I'm not going to talk about the franchise. I just want to talk about this one particular movie. I've seen the other movies except for the latest one, but this one is the first, and I still firmly believe that it's by far the best of them. And
Mhm.
even Steven Spielberg agreed. He said when he made the movie, after he'd made the movie, he didn't leave anything. He said he put everything that he wanted in the movie on the screen, and he was very happy with it. And I think he sort of even felt that way even after the other sequels. So
Yeah.
anyway,
I'm
and what
sure.
about you? Now, do you remember the first time you saw it?
I don't remember the first time, but I know that I watched all of them when I was a kid with my dad from Blockbuster or maybe on TV, but I
Mhm.
have, like, kind of impressions in my mind of, like, different scenes and stuff like that. I think I remember more of the second one because I think some of the the images are pretty striking of,
Mm.
like, monkey brains and people's hearts being pulled out, but I know I saw this movie when I was a kid. I saw all of them. I watched them with my dad, and I remember, like, the booby trap with the big rock and the faces melting and all of that stuff for sure, and, I also went when I was a kid and we went to Disney World, we went and saw the Indiana Jones, whatever, stunt spectacular, whatever they call it, the show.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think that's what it was,
Um,
the stunt spectacular.
we went and saw it, and I had to confirm with my mom, but I was scared, by it because I think I was, like, 4 maybe,
Mm. Oh, so
and,
yeah.
there's a lot of, like, explosions and fire and loud noises and also the big giant boulder, rolling and seeming as if that man would meet his peril. So, that was perhaps a bit much for me at 4, but I definitely watched the movie. I dressed up as Indiana Jones once in college for Halloween. That was my costume. I had most of the clothes. I had to buy a hat and I had to buy a whip because I was like, well, I can't be Indiana Jones and just like wear a brown jacket, of course. So,
No, of course.
um, but I think it worked out. But yeah, so I definitely watched it when I was a kid. I think, like you said, I think like Star Wars and then this just was sort of a natural kind of progression of watching stuff in the George Lucas universe, I guess. So,
So, talking about, you said you went as Indiana Jones at Halloween, and I made notes as I was, and I did watch snippets of it again just to refresh my memory. But I was looking at my closet, and I could go out of the house looking like Indiana Jones now as we speak. So I have everything. I have the khaki pants. I have there's a shirt. I have a hat. I have several hats. Denise will attest to that, and at least a couple of leather jackets. So, but it was
mhm.
just, it's I don't know what it's a common, for me, it's nothing to. I could throw all that stuff on and not think I look like Indiana Jones, but it's just people will say that though. They'll say, "Oh, you're dressed like Indiana Jones." Well, I've
I'm
been
pretty sure
dressing.
I've seen you dressed that way, like, with
Yeah,
the
I'm
with the
sure.
leather jacket and the hat on. I've definitely seen you out and about
So,
in the outfit for sure.
and
And
it's not a conscious thought to be Indiana Jones. It's just, after 40 some years that you just sort of
it's
grow
just
into
in
that.
you.
Yeah. So, and but the movie had that much of an impact on me. Maybe, I guess, because of that age, and you sort of felt like you were still young enough to, believe in that sort of thing.
Mhm,
Is and I'd like to talk about that a little bit later. Some of the things about the movie, you know the arc, and
mhm,
religion maybe in general. But I remember there was a thing I read about casting the part of Indiana Jones. One of the things they couldn't decide on was, did Indiana Jones believe in the
mm,
story of the Ark of the Covenant? Was he a believer, or was he just, an archaeologist? And this was
mhm.
just something to look for, as opposed to a real religious artifact.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question because it is, all of these movies, there is this level of, like, mysticism and sort of religion and, magic, I guess, a little bit, there's
Mm-hmm.
the supernatural level of things in kind of all of them that's interesting to consider. And I read too that when Harrison Ford was cast, he approached the role as Indiana Jones is a professor first and like adventurer action guy kind of
Mm-hmm.
second. So like the knowledge, the historical significance of things
Mm-hmm.
was primary, which I think you see in this movie too, right? Where he, towards the end, before the Nazis open up the Ark of the Covenant, Indiana Jones is threatening to blow it up. And his rival Belloc is like, he's not gonna blow it up. He would
Yeah.
never. He could never do that. He could
Right.
never destroy a historical artifact. So don't worry about him when he says he's gonna do that, because he's not going to.
Yeah, he's bluffing. But yeah, even because you first see him as Indiana Jones. I mean,
Hmm.
the guy with the whip and everything, and the jacket and stuff. But yeah, I think you're right. When then you see him in his role as a college professor, and
Hmm.
he seems even maybe more at ease in that
Yeah.
role as opposed to, the guy, out in the jungles and so on and so forth, tracking down, other antiquities. And his superior mentor, whatever you want to call it, the
Hmm.
gentleman at the college, he talks about, I think he's the one that infuses into Indy maybe a little bit about what he's going to look for when they come to him and ask him to find the ark. And
Hmm.
and even, because at that point, I think even in the movie, you get the feeling that to Indiana Jones, it's just an object.
Yeah.
I'll find it, and it's just an object. But then his friend says, this is something that you've never tried before.
Hmm.
This is unlike anything you've ever gone after before.
Yeah.
And even Indiana Jones, and if we're getting ahead of anybody, when the two G-men, the government guys, come to him and
Hmm.
they ask about the ark, and Indiana talks about, the history of the ark and then what it's supposed to be able to do and so on and so forth. Uh, and who wouldn't want to have that Bible that he opens up, by the way, which
Oh
I
my
guess,
goodness, with like
uh,
the buckles on it and
yeah,
everything.
exactly. Like, yeah. So, whoever, I don't know if that was a prop that they made or if they found an old Bible somewhere, but, and just the illustrations. And then,
Hmm.
and they even ask him, so what's this coming out of the ark? And fire,
Hmm.
death rays, the power of God.
Right.
Yeah. So it's like I said, I think at that age, I still kind of, and maybe I still do to a point, I believe in that sort of thing, that
Hmm.
hopefully there is things out there that maybe we don't know about enough yet, or that maybe we're not supposed to know about,
Hmm.
you
That
know,
are
that
sitting in crates in a warehouse somewhere. Who knows where?
I love that scene.
Full of who knows what. That scene, like, I've seen it before, but seeing that, I'm like, what else is in there?
Well, exactly. I mean,
Yeah, that's
so
the point. That's the point, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, exactly. What else? What other treasures have been put aside and forgotten
right.
after all these
What
years?
other like awesome god level biblical weapons are in this warehouse?
Well,
Just in a wooden crate.
it just boxed up, exactly.
Hmm.
So although and as the movie progresses and we follow the journey of Indy's search for the ark and the ark's journey, to
Hmm.
where it eventually gets to, you see even the power of the ark, even to sort of protect itself, or maybe to,
Yeah.
even when the Nazis have boxed it up and everything like that, and then it burns the box, that it's
Hmm.
in. But but why does it sit in a warehouse in the United States for all
Yeah.
that time? Is it because the United States is good and Germany's evil? I
That's
don't.
a good question.
That's a deeper question,
Yeah.
I think, that than I have the answer to. But I wondered about that, not at the time when I saw the movie, but
Hmm. Yeah, later. I guess now it's like nobody's messing with it. It sort of gives the flavor of like, all the sort of mystical objects. It's like the sword and the stone and like Thor's hammer. It's like there's like you have to be worthy or whatever to
yeah.
get this, right? And it's the same in like the other movies, right? When you get to, I know we're talking not talking about the other movies, but like
No, no,
in
that's
The
fine. Yeah,
Last Crusade, right? The same kind of thing. It's like, oh, you're trying to go for the fancy cup. It's actually the very humble, like ugly
yeah.
cup, whatever. And that all of that for the Holy Grail. So I think it is this level of like worthy these sort of objects that have all of this like spiritual meaning and power. It's like a it protects itself from those who are not worthy of accessing its its gifts.
And you bring up a good point, and I said I wasn't going to discuss the other movies, but you're right. In the third movie, it's the Grail, and there's a price to be paid
Mm-hmm.
for its gift, and the price is that you can never leave that area. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a
Yeah.
two-edged sword. It's,
Mm-hmm.
you get the benefit, and yeah, if you have the arc, you have the capability of using it for all this destruction, but it will evidently protect itself against someone who's trying to use it as an evil thing.
Yeah.
So for the
Mm-hmm.
Jewish people, it helped them liberate themselves.
Yeah. That was something I thought was funny too. Speaking of Jewish people, when they're like getting ready to go test it out, and the Nazi guy's like, I don't want to do all this Jewish ritual stuff. And it's like, do you know? He didn't hear the story at the beginning, I guess. Like, this is the tablets that Moses got from God. Like,
Right. Yeah.
I mean, obviously this is like Christianity too, but like this is like heavy Jewish stuff.
Yeah,
Why
exactly.
are you like trying to get this then? If you're like, ew, no, gross. That's why I was like, see, this is why it melts your face off, man.
Well,
This is why you can't be anti-Semitic and have the Ark of the
and then
Covenant.
try to play, yeah, with the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah,
So,
like, do you know the covenant? That covenant? Do you know who?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
God made a covenant with who?
who? The Jewish people.
Right. So it's like I don't know what you expect. But yeah, anyways, it was interesting too that they used this as the center point for Nazis too, because like Hitler was into like occult and
Yeah,
mysticism and stuff like that.
and evidently he was looking for things like this,
Yeah.
throughout, World War II. So whether or not, I don't know how active it was or how true that
Hmm.
was, but that I'd heard that story before the movie had come
Yeah.
out, that
Yeah.
in the history of World War II, that he was obsessed with the occult,
Hmm.
because there are things that I've read where he felt like Germany's manifest destiny was that they were supposed to rule the world,
Right.
that the Aryan race. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
and they were the true, whatever you want, title holders or whatever you
Yeah.
want to call
Ubermensch and
it.
all of that.
Exactly. So,
But yeah, that I think that like sort of stuff does give it a little bit of, obviously it's sort of like fantastical thing, but it also gives it a little bit of groundedness in
mm,
history too.
sure, yeah. I think, yeah, that was one of the other things I thought too, was the whole movie. It didn't stray too far from, I thought, the actual events of World War II, and everybody, of my generation, and which was only just two generations removed from World War II, that
Hmm.
Germany was, the Nazis were the ones that tried to perpetrate world domination, and
Hmm.
not the German people per se, but, and that the Allies came out in the end, and maybe in playing, weaving this into it like a, what's the fictional history, I
Yeah.
guess.
Hmm.
So, which I thought they did a very good job of.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
and although and then I talked about, so Lawrence Kasdan, though, who wrote the screenplay,
Hmm.
and then ended up working with the Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, on I think the Empire Strikes Back, the third.
Yeah. He wrote a few actually of the Star
Yeah,
Warses.
yeah. So,
But yeah,
but
he worked with they picked him up for Empire Strikes Back. Yeah.
yeah, but I
Which
think
is
it
the
was
best
like,
one, just to be
ag-
clear.
agreed,
If
agreed.
anyone disagrees with us, they're wrong. It's the best one. Period. Anyway, sorry.
Well, no,
Lawrence Kasdan,
that's okay. If anyone disagrees with that, this is the best, Indiana Jones movie, you're wrong.
also
Sorry.
incorrect.
Exactly. So, you're entitled to your opinion, but it's a wrong one. So,
Hmm.
I'll take the hit for that. But that he did a really good job, I thought, like, talking about world events,
Hmm.
and then putting that into context with what was going on, that in the world, and Indiana Jones's world, and so on. So it was sort
Hmm.
of, Indiana Jones was this scholarly professor, and what he did didn't really, the outside world didn't really impact on him
Hmm.
as much, except when then they intersected it at this junction. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
I thought that kind of thing made it this sort of a cooler hero than, I think obviously it makes it, I guess, not necessarily cooler, but like stand out from like the James Bonds, and like I'm thinking of other movies like that, like Mission Impossible and like that kind of stuff where it's this sort of like hero kind of thing that like he has a day job, right? This is like his side thing, and all like
Right.
that, like you said, he's like scholarly. You know, there could also be like an almost like nerdiness of his interest in these artifacts, but also like he can like run and jump and like shoot people and hit them with the whip and like sneak in and smuggle stuff. So it's like I think that makes it a little bit more interesting too.
I
Not to say that like the other ones aren't, but like, you know, James Bond is like very suave and like being a spy is his thing, and he has all these gadgets and stuff. And same with Mission Impossible. There's all this technology and gadgets, and like being a spy is Ethan, whatever, I can't think of his last name, is Tom Cruise's job,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But Indiana Jones is a professor, and like on the side, he like is it like a grave robber basically, who occasionally does like big missions.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what the context was maybe in that he was there to collect artifacts for the museum for the
Mhm.
school and stuff. So
Yeah.
and even like when at the very beginning of the movie, for those of for what the three of you who haven't seen this movie that are listening to us, at the very beginning, he's on a quest to find evidently a small statue or a head of a statue, and then but and then he fails because he's outsmarted or whatever by a rival, but he does come back and he tells Marcus, and I just now remember his friend's name,
Mhm.
Marcus. He says, "But Marcus, these are I got some good pieces. These are good pieces." And it was, "Oh, I'm sure that the museum or it will pay you the usual, whatever,
Mhm.
So it's he's finding stuff for to sell or to acquire for the collection. So it's
Mhm.
in addition to teaching and stuff, I guess, this is part of maybe that's what's led him on this path is, oh, I've learned about all this stuff. Now, what can I do with this knowledge? Oh, I'll go out and I'll look for it. And then,
Yeah.
or maybe find something. And then in the meantime, I'm sure college professors didn't make a whole lot of money back then. So,
Probably
and
not. There are a lot less people going to college, so
yes,
probably not. Apparently, only the girls who were infatuated with him were the people in his class. The classic, like the love you written
oh,
on the eyelids, and all the girls just like
oh,
staring at him adoringly. Which, like, listen, if Harrison Ford was my professor, same.
so I was going to ask you, did you ever have a professor where you put "love you" on your eyelids?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
So
Not
evidently there was no Harrison Ford professor
no, not at
in your life.
anywhere I
Okay.
studied. No, it was a lot
No,
of
no.
I'm now like racking my brain. There were professors I went to the same college as my mom. There were professors there that hadn't been professors when my mom was there. Um, so no, that we had no Dr. Joneses at
Oh, okay.
where I went to college. Absolutely not. Even when I studied in Europe, still no Dr.
No, really,
Joneses.
no, no. Okay, so
No.
just wondered. So, but
Unfortunately, if only it would
mm,
have made, especially if they could have been like my theology was okay. Philosophy, that would have
yeah,
made it a lot more tolerable because I hated philosophy. I would
mm,
have stayed awake better.
good point. I would have taken archaeology if someone like Professor Jones, not because of the way he looked, but if he said, "Oh, well, I went to Brazil or wherever it was he was in
Yeah.
the beginning," and then
Yeah.
um,
All of the above for me.
yeah, or he talked
Mhm.
about like the grave sites, when he was doing the
Mhm.
lecture and stuff, and he goes, "But this chamber, this, and this," and you can imagine him, he would be like, over in Egypt or
Yeah.
someplace, where they were doing the digs and stuff for either Tutankhamun's tomb or
Mhm.
or somebody else. So,
Yeah, that would be cool. Like when in 6th grade when I learned about ancient civilizations, if like my social studies teacher had been there, that would have been made Mesopotamia even cooler
yeah,
to
or
learn
if
about.
yeah, or if they had like some movies where they talk about they take students on field trips, that
Mhm.
they're able to go on digs or archaeological sites. So,
Yeah.
but so
Yes.
anyway, I think that the storyline was really well done. There wasn't like big holes in the plot that I
Mm-mm.
thought. There was the continuity was really really good.
Mhm.
And again, I'm not saying anything that 10,000 other people haven't said 10,000 other times, but the movie just made such a big impression on me that it became sort of like, you couldn't wait until the next one came out, only because you enjoyed the first one so much. And then I hate to say it, but I always was left feeling a little disappointed after each subsequent movie came out, because it just never quite measured up to the first one. At least to me, it didn't. Elements of it, but it never left me with the same feeling of exhilaration and
Yeah.
suspense, and there were some funny bits in it. Some of it was intentional, I'm sure. The monkey who gives a Nazi salute, and
Yeah, the monkey is a double agent. Oh my
is a double
gosh.
agent, and then oddly enough, the monkey gets what it deserves in the end, evidently, because
I know.
I know,
It
the
did make
poor
me
little monkey.
sad though. I was like,
Oh, I know. The
this
monkey
monkey's
didn't hurt.
not it was it was brainwashed
Yeah, it was
by
led
the
astray
guy,
by his owner
his
or
human
whatever.
owner. Yeah.
Yeah, so and then getting into some of the other supporting actors, then we see someone from my movie that I picked is Karen Allen,
Yes. And I
who
read
is
that she was cast because of that movie.
exactly as Marion Ravenwood,
Mhm.
and we don't get to see, however, one of the plot characters, her father, who comes into
Mhm.
prominence. That's how this starts, is evidently, some sort of communication between, her father, who is a famous archaeologist, and then
Mhm.
evidently who Indiana studied under,
Yeah.
worked with, and so on. And then we get to meet some of, I guess, some of Indy's, then, in addition to Marcus, his Sala, his
Mhm.
friend that he knows in
Yeah.
well, Egypt. So,
Yeah, yeah. John Reese, played by John Reese Davies, who other people may know as Gimli from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. He's one of my favorite characters in the
oh,
movie. Um,
and he's great in this as the
mhm.
almost as the comical sidekick.
Yeah.
In a lot of this movie, they talked about, they wanted to base it on some of the Saturday morning serials that,
Mhm.
and I don't mean breakfast stuff, for people that don't know
Yes,
the.
Serials.
Yeah, thank you. So, about, that showed in the movie theaters, and some of it were based on the westerns, and like,
Mhm.
if you looked at, like, Roy Rogers, and so they had, these comical sidekicks, and Sala, I
Yeah.
think, sort of fit that role, and not in a slapstick sort of way, because he was very capable, very
Mhm.
aware, and but he also was, the one scene I think that sums it up best is when they break into the Well of Souls, and they look
Mhm.
down, and and it's snakes. And Indiana Jones, we found out in the first opening scenes, he hates snakes. He's
Yes.
terrified of snakes. And as they look down in there, it says, why is the floor moving? Oh, it's snakes. And he goes, and then Sala looks down, he goes, asps, very dangerous, you go first. It's
Yes.
like, you go ahead and I'll follow.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll
I'm
see
right
how that
behind you,
works
man.
out for you. Yeah, so
Right behind you. I got
yeah,
you.
I got you, buddy, I got your back. So but even when they're trying to get into that part, Sala is the one that gets them into the German camp,
Mhm.
and gets them on as diggers,
Yeah.
disguising them, and
Saves him from the poison date. That part was
saves him
great
from.
when he
Exactly.
snatches it out
Yeah,
of the air before it
bad
gets into
dates.
Indy's mouth. Bad dates. Yeah.
Bad dates. So,
As the
um,
monkey is dead, rest in peace to the monkey.
we don't ever. The monkey doesn't have a name.
Yeah. And the guy is just called the Monkey Man, I
The
think.
monkey, yeah, in the credits.
So
So,
rest in peace to the monkey who was led astray by that man.
and then the actor who played Belloc, who is Indiana's rival,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
archaeologist, in the beginning, you see him, he gets the idol away from Indiana, and then he, tells the natives to kill him, but Indiana gets to escape. But it turns out, though, that he's really not evil. He's just And he even says that he and Indiana are very much alike, and they
Mhm.
really are if you think about it. They're just doing it for a little bit different reasons. But Belloc is
Yeah.
just as interested in the history of the object as Indiana is.
Mhm.
He
Yes.
doesn't care though who gets it. He just wants to find it.
Right, right. Whoever's
What
gonna
what
pay me and take it, that's fine as long as I get to be the first one to like lay eyes and hands on it.
exactly. Yeah, because even to the point where they find the ark, he, wears the ritual garb,
Mm-hmm.
dons the priest robe, or well, I guess the not a priest, but
Yeah, whatever the ceremonial robe is. But yeah, and I
yeah.
think he just wanted to see it. He convinces the Nazi guys to do it because he's like, well, you wouldn't want to get this in front of Hitler and it doesn't
Mm,
work, right?
yeah.
So like,
So
let me just try it. Obviously he wanted to do it for his own like curiosity. And I have a brief aside as I want to do so sorry, but I looked
no.
up the actor that plays Belloc is a guy named Paul Freeman. And I just saw on his Wikipedia that he also played, this will probably mean nothing to you, Jim, I'm sorry. In the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie, the villain is a guy named Ivan Ooze, who's like a purple guy that basically like he has this ooze that like brainwashes all the parents of Angel City, which is where the Power Rangers live, to basically like dig to like bring up his monsters and then like walk off a cliff and kill themselves.
Ooh.
But he played Ivan Ooze. So anybody who, grew up in the 90s that watched the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie,
Oh
he
gosh.
Belloc in Raiders of the Lost Ark, also Ivan Ooze. There you go.
There you go.
So sorry, that's an
No,
aside, but I
no.
was just like,
I'm
oh my God, he's Ivan Ooze.
well. Again, I think this is part of why we're doing this whole thing is that we
Mhm.
each come to this movie with a different perspective and so on. And you saw this movie well after it was released because
Yes.
yes,
I was born a little bit like a decade after it was released.
thanks.
Sorry.
No, 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 it's no problem. So, but so I'm sure you've seen the actors, and we've seen them go on to do other things, the main
Mhm.
actors, but then I'm sure you've seen other actors and so on throughout this
Mhm.
that show up in movies that I may not have seen, or in shows that I may not have seen, but you did. So
Yeah, yeah. I will say the other people, I mean, obviously at the beginning, you get a brief Alfred Molina cameo. And I was
a
like,
very young Alfred
yes, a
Molina,
very
by the
young, I
way.
have to imagine this was like early career Alfred
Oh,
Molina.
I'm
Cause I was
sure
like, what is
if
Alfred
not his
Molina
first
doing in
role,
this bit part? But
who really gets his comeuppance.
he does. And I was like, that dummy does not look like Alfred Molina.
Not at all, no, but
But yeah, so he sort of double crosses Indy at the beginning. But I was like, oh, Alfred Molina, who
so
obviously like, I've seen in other things besides not just Spider-Man 2, but also Not Without My Daughter is probably the movie I have watched the
oh yeah,
second
yeah,
most that he's
yeah.
in
So
with Sally Field. And then one other one that I didn't know about before, Karanga, is that his name? The guy on the
Taranga,
ship.
the captain of the ship.
The captain of the ship. So towards the end, when
Hmm.
Marion and Indy are trying to just take the Ark to England, and they're on that ship, and there's a guy named Taronga who's the captain of the ship. I was watching it and I was like, that face is so familiar to me. I know that face. So then I looked it up, and again, it was probably my generation, but went on to play Kingsley Shacklebolt in the Harry Potter movies. So he's
Oh,
in the last few. Obviously, not like a huge part, but if you're a Potterhead,
even
Kingsley
still,
Shacklebolt. He's an Auror that appears. He fights with the Order of the Phoenix. He fights with the good guys against Voldemort, and then later in the books he becomes the Minister of Magic afterwards. But you don't really see that in the movies. But anyways, I was like, oh, it's Kingsley Shacklebolt because I was like, why does this man's face look so familiar to me? And it was because obviously I hadn't seen this movie in a very long time, so I was like, I don't think it's just from this. And it turns out he was in the Harry Potter movies. So lots of people in various other franchises. We're really hitting a lot of like we're hitting Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars. We're covering a lot of nerdy ground here with some of these actors. Spider-Man,
Spider-Man. I was going to say, what, look, great
and
talent is
Power Rangers.
and Power Rangers. So, but I think great talent is recognized by great people.
Hmm.
So we've seen these people and showing their careers, and like I was talking about Karen Allen, who
Hmm.
went from Animal House to this, and as Marion, and then
Hmm.
and by the way, and you brought up the captain of the ship, Taranga, and that at first you think he's kind of like maybe a little shady or whatever it may
Mm-hmm.
be, but it turns out he's really on the good side. And then
Yeah.
because Sala had arranged transportation, with him, so it was
Mm-hmm.
one of those things. But in that whole scene where it unfolded, where Taranga said, take your gold or whatever it is that you want, but leave me the girl. I can at least make some profit. Like he's going to
Mm-hmm.
sell her, into
Yeah.
into slavery. But they don't even he doesn't even get to do that. And then
Mm-hmm.
the big scene, and there's always a big scene where Indiana does something, really heroic and stuff. And then you see, and in this particular part where all of a sudden they say, well, where's Dr. Jones? And then there he is. He's climbing on board the submarine after
Mm-hmm.
he's jumped off the boat, evidently.
Yeah. And they
And
all salute him.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he's like salutes back. And then you think, wait a minute, he's going to ride on the outside of a submarine to God knows where for how long? And then they
Right.
show the little path, the sub takes, or, just like they
Mm-hmm.
do with the airplane and stuff. And you think, wait a minute, how long did it take him to get there? And would this guy have anything to eat or drink along the way? So, but he's just hanging on to the outside of the sub, just waiting for it to dock.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I thought that was an interesting part of the thing. And then the byplay between him and Marion in the cabin where he's all beat up
And
and
she hits him again with the mirror.
with the mirror. And I still use that the line that Indiana uses to this day. It's not the years, honey. It's the mileage. So
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
when you talk about how much you've gone through or how much you've suffered. It's not how old you are. It's not the years. It's the mileage. So
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
I have to say too, I like Marion Ravenwood as like a romantic partner
oh
for
yeah,
Indiana Jones because she's not like a damsel. Which you get more like again in like the next movie is a little bit more forgiving damsel, but she like right when you meet her for the first time, she's having a drinking contest that she wins at
against
like a
some
bar in
big
Nepal.
dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like they're drinking whatever that stuff is. It looks like
Yeah.
gasoline, or something. But yeah, and
Yeah.
plus she owns the bar, so
Mm-hmm.
it's not like she just works there. It's her place. And then we
Yeah.
meet
She
the
can hold her
terrifying,
own.
yeah, very
Oh
much so.
yeah. The
And
scary Nazi.
the
Oh.
scary Nazi,
And
yes.
he's like,
And then
"Hello, Fraulein."
Thought, who and again, I talked about some of the funny bits and so on, where and then in that scene where they're in the bar and so on, where he the fight ensues and they're looking for the medallion and everything, and then he sees it, not knowing that it's been heated to
Mm-hmm.
10,000 degrees or whatever, and picks it up, and then and then you see him, he screams and so on. So and then Indiana gets in the big fight. He's trying to rescue her. And then as he leans over the bar and the flames coming around and he's like going, whiskey, and he's like, and she hands him a bottle. So it just those little bits and pieces that they did all throughout the movie. I thought that it just made every scene almost to me, just something to enjoy. There was no dragging or slow parts of the movie, I thought
Mm-hmm.
at all. So
Yeah, there are so many like chases and fights and like constant like movement that
mm,
even like in the parts in between, it's like, okay, we're figuring stuff out. Like, it never felt like we were, even when we're not stagnant, I
it,
guess, is
that's a great way to put it. No,
what I
you're
would say.
exactly right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no. That Nazi guy was I remember his face because I feel like he scared me a little bit as a kid because he is well they like light him very
oh yeah,
sinisterly and he's
right.
like
And from
we're all
below, and
yeah, and I was like why is he like sweaty when he's going to like he's heating up the fire
oh,
poker
the
thing.
poker
I was like
thing.
why is he so wet? It's weird. Like that made him like icky to me too. I'm like he's just like oozing evil from his pores. And he had that like the like I said, like the voice of good evening, Fraulein. Like
Mm,
and
oh,
then when you meet him, when he comes back later, they like hire that he's gonna come like torture Marion for information. He pulls out that thing and you're like, oh my God, what is this? But then it's just like a hanger. What is this torture device? Oh, it's like a weird fold up hanger he has for his coat.
For his overcoat, and then she's wearing that dress. Remember that
Yeah.
Belloc had given her, and then
Mhm.
she sort of did it as a distraction. But he
Mhm.
said, "You Americans are always the same, overdressing for all the wrong occasions."
Mhm. Mhm.
But
Says the man wearing all black and a full overcoat in Egypt.
in Egypt, I was getting ready to say the same, and it's a black leather overcoat, which
Yes.
I'm sure
That's why he's sweaty all the time.
exactly. So I'm surprised that he doesn't weigh like 90 pounds, that he's just a rag, but
Right. Right. He's
yeah,
losing, he's like making weight for wrestling.
and he's all in black. He's got the black leather overcoat and the felt fedora and everything. Yeah, and then everybody else is like wearing turbans and then the long flowy stuff like Lawrence of Arabia, and then
Mm.
he's walking around like it's 20 degrees below zero in Amsterdam or whatever. So, but then as the movie unfolds, and like I said, so it just, to me, it was just exciting, and it was fun. I cheered, even as a young adult, I guess you could put it. I was 20 some years old, when Indiana rode, after the Nazis on his horse and stuff, and then
Hmm.
he always seems to figure a way out of things without it being like too contrived, I guess, is one of the scenes, and it's in the stunt spectacular, or was,
Hmm.
is with the airplane and the mechanic,
Mm.
where he's getting into a fight, and this guy's just huge, and he's just going to beat his butt, and but then Indy gets a break. The guy doesn't see that the plane is moving around in a circle, and that's
Yeah.
what gets him. It's not Indiana's superior fighting skills, and he can't get to
Hmm.
his gun, and Marion's locked in the canopy. So
Yeah. That part made me laugh because every time Harrison Ford got hit, he or whoever is his stunt double, I was like, he's like full pirouetting. Every time he got hit, it was like a full spin, like a very graceful spin. But yeah, I think all of those things are funny. And like you said, the part when he gets on the horse, when they have the ark in the truck and he gets on the horse, Marion and Sala are like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I don't know. I'm making it up as I go."
he just tells him, yeah, he goes, meet me in such and such a place with a truck, in a couple of days, and I'll have the ark, I'll,
Yeah.
I'll figure it out. So
Between
um,
now and then, I'm gonna figure it out.
I'm gonna
Just
I'm gonna get the
you
ark
be
away.
there and I'll get there. I appreciate that optimistic spirit that he has. But yeah, I think that he that kind of stuff makes me laugh so much. I also really love the part after he thinks Marion is dead and he meets Belloc
Yeah.
in the little hookah place and he's gonna shoot him. He pulls out his gun, and then literally every other person in the bar pulls out their guns and puts them on him, and he's swept away by all the like army of Sala's children are like, come on, come on, come on, we gotta go home, we gotta
And
go
Uncle Indy, yeah,
home.
come with me. And yeah, because and once again, Sala rushes in to save Indy's skin, because
Hmm.
yeah, if Indy had had his way, he would, because he said he didn't really care if he lived or died. So,
Yeah.
and preceding that is one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie, is
Is the guy
where
with the swords?
the guy with the sword. So come on,
I knew
it's
you would
it's a
like that.
it's a classic, and here you've got this big build up Indy with his whip, and the guy with this huge sword, and who's going to win in Indiana Jones. And then when I thought about it at the time, I thought, so typically American. But wait a minute, let's just take the easy way out. Let's just shoot him. And
Yeah.
it's like, I'm 50 feet away from him. He won't get near me with that sword. So I've got a gun. I don't need the whip. I could
Yeah.
just, and he does. He just shoots him. So
Yeah, it's so funny because like you said, it's like there's this whole scene of like chasing and fighting and stuff, and he's using his whip and he's hitting people and like kicking them, punching them, whatever. And this big guy with the is swinging his sword around, and it's like the curved sword that you see in like Aladdin, and
right,
then
yeah.
bang,
Yeah, just like, and and,
down he
and
goes.
and the look on Indy's face, it's like, really, and then he just pulls out his pistol and just shoots him, and it's
Right.
like,
He's like, I am tired.
yeah,
Like
I
I've done
don't have to,
enough.
I don't have to put up with this, no, we're
Yes.
not doing this part. So yeah, and then and then like I said, and then runs off after Marion, which he finds out later on is she's still alive. So
Yeah.
but so just bits and pieces like that all throughout the movie, and then and so on, and then until we get down to we were talking a little bit about where they have the Ark, the Nazis have the Ark, Belloc has the Ark, he has Marion, he's got all the cards, and Indy is going to blow up the Ark, or he says he's going to, with a bazooka or whatever it is, and then Belloc calls his bluff, and no, he won't destroy it, because he's a lover of antiquities like I am. So, and then he's right, and he calls his bluff, and then so they off they go, and then we get to see the big reveal scene about what's actually inside the Ark.
Yeah. Some sand first. Just some sand.
Which I couldn't figure out. Does that mean that the tablets have like disintegrated? That's what I thought at first. I thought
I
that's what they
guess
were going to.
so.
I don't know, or is that like and then you saw all the stuff come out of the Ark, and
All the
then
ghosts. It was very that scene was very like Ghostbusters. That's what the ghosts look like when they're all, coming out of the proton pack.
coming and swarming out. Yeah, like you thought you were in the library and stuff. When
Yes.
they were swimming through.
And
But
there's that lady ghost that like turns scary and makes that Nazi start screaming. That guy's screaming the whole movie.
Well, and rightfully so at the end, because
Yes.
and then the part where they're he and Marion are tied at the stake, which you don't. I don't know what that was all about.
Right, are they gonna burn them? I guess I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. That's what it looked like. It was like Joan of Arc or something.
Right.
So
Maybe they thought the Ark, they were gonna like shoot the Ark at them or something, and
well, it could be
as a demonstration, because they had their, Lenny Riefenstahl videotaping it as they, as shows of Hitler's power or whatever.
Right. With all speaking of which, ended, or it turned out to be the wrong thing to do, because evidently the Ark used that to then zap all the other Nazis.
Yeah.
The
Like
German.
shooting fire through all of, like they all had a hole in their abdomen.
Well, and in their eyes, with through their eyes and stuff, and then but what a great scene though, with the three, the Nazis, Belloc, well, not Belloc and the two, oh, I know, Belloc's head exploding. For those of you,
and he was really into it up to the last moment. Like the Nazis are screaming, Belloc's like, all right, here we go, it's happening, it's all happening.
This is what I wanted. Yeah,
boom, there goes his head. But it was another moment of payoff, right? Because at the beginning, when we see what's in the Ark, and he's like, well, like fire or something, I guess,
yeah.
So Indiana Jones was like, whatever's coming out of there, probably not a good thing. So he told Mary, he was like, close your eyes. Things are getting weird, but just keep your eyes closed.
Don't look.
And it worked out for them.
But I wonder now, thinking about that just now, I thought, since they were supposedly on the good side, even if they'd opened their eyes, would the Ark have hurt them? I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't like, I do, what are the rules, right? If
Right,
like,
because
if the bad guys open it for bad reasons and you're like in the midst, are you lumped in?
right, or you lumped in, but because when they, because when the Jewish people carried it, and then used it to, destroy their enemies or whatever, they had their eyes open. I'm sure, it's going like,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, they were the subject of the covenant, right? Like they were the
right. Well,
recipients of
that's
the
true.
covenant too. So like, I don't know, but
I don't know.
I don't know.
Just
We
thought about
don't.
that.
It's a good question. But yeah, because what are the rules of the covenant? Does anybody know? Can anyone expound on the rules of the Ark of the Covenant? That feels like also this feels like the beginning of like a Dan Brown novel too. That's always.
Oh.
It's like
maybe
he's
that's why I
like
like Dan Brown so much.
I was gonna say he's like Indiana Jones without like the fighting, without the physical part, right? Because he's a professor and does all the like, he knows the antiquities and like all the religious stuff, but he doesn't, no whip, no gun, no running, jumping. He does the thinking and the traveling.
Right.
But not the running and jumping.
And the knowledge, right? I was going to say,
yeah.
So, but for those of you who, and speaking of which, so here's another aside, for those of you who like that in a modern day setting, Steve Barry is an author who writes a series of historical fiction, and the main character is Cotton Malone, who is sort of like a modern day Indiana Jones, who does do the running, the jumping, the fighting and stuff, but he's also a very scholarly person, owns a bookstore in Greece, I think.
Oh, cool.
some small, but anyway, so but looks for different things. So there's but along those lines. So I
I
just
wonder
haven't.
if Dan Brown likes Indiana Jones.
That's a good question. That's,
Have to
we should. So
investigate.
I know we should. So if anybody is connected to
Yeah.
Dan Brown, we're
When we
asking.
get to the Da Vinci Code, we'll revisit. If we get to, I don't know, the Da Vinci Code is not my most impactful. Although when I went to see it at the movies with my friend, this is again another aside, sorry everybody, but they depict the Catholic sect of Opus Dei as like villainous and
Oh,
scary. And people from Opus Dei were protesting outside the mall
oh,
in like scary black robes. I was like, you guys are
you're.
not helping your case. They're holding these big like banners with like
Oh,
Opus Dei are nice or whatever. I was like, you look like the villain in like a medieval, like if I went to medieval times, like you look like the villain at
the
medieval times
bad
or the
people.
Renaissance Festival, like in, and it's like summer, daytime, all black. Like
Not a good
you
look.
guys gotta like workshop the image here. I don't like, is there a
Yeah.
friendlier one of you that could be out here doing this? But yeah,
Right. Yeah.
that's my main memory. And also I was like watching that movie, I was like, no one in this movie turns on the lights. Every room is dark in that movie in the Da Vinci Code. Um,
Oh, yeah, as good.
but
Yeah, in the first one.
yes, yeah, in the Da
Yes.
Vinci, and
Yes.
then Angels and Demons was better. Angels and Demons because they're like outside in Rome a lot. But it
Right.
was
Yeah.
it, and that also made me think like when I went to Rome in college and we had to like go tour all the churches. I was like, this is basically the church tour I went on, but with murder.
There you go. So,
If there had been murders while I was on my church tours, it would be Angels and Demons. But anyways,
the,
sorry about that.
no, no,
It
no.
just occurred to me. I was like, oh, Robert Langdon is like Indiana Jones without the action.
Well,
He's just looking for religious artifacts.
exactly, and a good point, and has the scholarly knowledge that Indiana does.
Exactly. Yeah, he's a
For
college professor.
exactly. So,
He's just Tom Hanks with a bad haircut.
so
His hair was weird in those movies. Like he has
it
that like
was,
weird long thing.
yeah,
Anyways,
sort of like, but so yeah, good thought though. Yeah,
making connections here.
right? Did Dan Brown or Steve Barry draw their inspiration from Indiana Jones? I don't know.
Yeah, that's something we'll have to do some further research on. But
Research. So and then of course the big payoff, at the end of the movie is, as Lindsay and I alluded to a little bit earlier, is of course the Ark is recovered, and as Lindsay and I have worked for government agencies,
mhm.
and understand government bureaucracy. And then when Indiana asks where the Ark is and what happened to the Ark, he's told that it's in safe hands.
Yes. Top men are working on it. And he
Top.
says, who? Top men.
Yeah.
Mind you, for people who haven't seen this movie or don't remember the details, he agreed to do this because they said, obviously, he'd get paid a lot and the Ark would go to the museum.
Correct. And he would get to study the Ark, and
Yes.
after they were done with whatever it was they were going to do with it,
Yes.
evidently.
And
So
we see what they do with it is just put it in a warehouse full of all sorts of other wooden crates that could be full of who knows what.
maybe goes to speak to our, maybe all governments, but maybe more so our government bureaucracy is, this is what we do with things. We just sort of box them up and put them away and hope nobody else wants to look for them.
Yep, yep. We do get to visit that place again, though, in the, again, sorry, skipping to
Oh
future
no,
ones, but
yep.
the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which is bad.
Don't,
Um,
please do yourself a favor. If you're a fan of the franchise, don't watch that one.
Stop
If
at the
you're,
Last Crusade. It has the
yes,
word last in it. Treat it as the last one.
good point.
Kate Blanchett, girl, what were you doing? But yeah, that alien thing comes out of one of those crates in that movie. So
Yeah.
that's the only time we get to, maybe that's why they made another one. They were like, people kept asking, what's in
You
the other crates?
what's in the other crates? Oh, the
I wish
alien.
we shouldn't have asked. We should have just left it alone.
I was kind of hoping it would have been, something along the lines of, well, I guess, the Holy Grail he hadn't found yet. So, or he had, I'll take it. Yeah, he hadn't found that yet. So,
yeah.
but so, like I said, I'm sure people have listened to infinity about people about this movie and so on and so forth. And yes, maybe it is an obvious pick, but it did have a huge influence on me in how I don't know, in how I perceived government at the time. I was just starting out
Mhm.
my career with the government, and I sort of got that feeling that that's how the government was sort of heavy-handed and high-handed, and the upper part of the government didn't want to let you know what was going on,
Mm.
and they had their own agenda, and that they would use people for their own purposes to get what they wanted, and then they would sort
Mhm.
of just okay, we're done. So,
Yeah.
and the fashion thing, like I said, and that was not just me. I think everybody at that time, at one point or another, I'm sure every male between the age of 15 and 50 went out and bought a leather jacket and a hat and a
Yeah.
fedora and wore it at some point. And then, but I think it's still the influence still shows today. I think it
Mhm.
fashions and so on. That's still an accepted. Like no one thinks differently, or that it's odd that if you wore a pair of khaki pants and a tan or neutral shirt and a
Mhm.
jacket, that oh yeah, that's okay, everybody
Yeah.
dresses like that. So
Mhm.
to the point where there's a whole industry about what's the most authentic Indiana Jones fedora, what's the most authentic Indiana Jones leather jacket, and boots, even the shoes that Indy wore. And as a trivia, I know we didn't talk about or we were going to talk about, but he wore those boots, Harrison Ford did, because those were the boots he wore because he worked as a part-time carpenter.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they
I
were
always
like,
read that
they
that's
were
how he
work
got
boots.
his first like movie jobs, because people like George Lucas knew him as a carpenter.
Oh, okay. I did not know that.
I
So
don't
I
know if
knew
that's
that,
true. That might be
but
apocryphal, but
I
like
knew that
I
he
had
did
read
do
that.
carpentry work. And then
Mhm.
that showed up in a movie later on he did with where he was Witness,
Mm.
where he played the police officer who was hiding amongst the Amish, and then it
Oh
showed him
yes.
he was helping build a barn.
Mm.
But anyway, but he wore these, but now they're horribly expensive. They're
I'm
like
sure.
$600 or $700 if you went to go buy a pair from Alden's. That's the company that makes them, and they
Mhm.
are made in the United States. But there was always this big thing about like the hat that he wore and the
Mm.
jacket that he wore, and people trying to replicate. And you can go to the companies that made the original jacket and made the original hat, and you can spend hundreds of dollars, or
Mhm.
you can do like I did. And I went to it was either Macy's or one of the stores 40 years ago, or about that time, yeah, and bought a hat in a department store, but it was Indiana Jones trademark, and it was made by Stetson, and it's a dress hat, and I've had it for 40 years and wear it occasionally. So just
There you
just every
go.
now and then. So, but
Nice. Nice.
so with you, did it leave any impressions on you that you think have lasted since you've seen it, or other than the fact that I guess you won't go near the Indiana Jones stunt spectacular?
I would revisit it. I would revisit it now.
We should go. We should go one day. You and I should go just
We
to see,
should. The last
just to
couple
re.
times, yeah, I went to Disney World. I didn't go to whatever Hollywood Studios, I guess.
No,
It was
okay.
called MGM Studios when I was a kid, but now it's Hollywood Studios, I think. But yeah, that's where they have it. So
Yeah, yeah. So, but
I haven't been over there in a while. So
I
I
saw it one time, and it was probably around the same time that you did. It was in the 90s.
probably, yeah, I
You
want
know,
to say
when
it was like in 94 to like 97 range.
it had to have been before 97 because I remember who I went with. So, but it was probably, it was around it was, well, let's see, probably 91 to 93. It is, I'm
Okay.
pretty sure is when I saw it. So, but
I think,
yeah, that'd
yeah.
be interesting to see what our reaction would be to that now, with,
Yeah. I think now I would think it's cool. But then when I was like,
oh
I
no,
think
I
I
could,
was like
yeah,
4 and it was just like
oh, I could see,
overwhelming. For reference, I also got scared. So I used to go to like Disney on Ice whenever they came.
mm-hmm,
And at the Little Mermaid Disney on Ice, towards the end of Little Mermaid, Ursula gets big.
yeah, right.
That happened. And
Oh,
it was terrifying.
well, it would be for me too.
Right?
So,
Like I'm a giant sea witch just like
mm-hmm,
taking up the whole arena. But yeah, so but anyways, we should we got to go revisit. We got
I
to
think so.
check it
Yeah.
out for sure. And now we can go now they have all the Star Wars stuff there and Marvel
Oh, perfect.
area and stuff. So
Perfect.
we can take on like all the things we're into. But
Yeah.
I think that for me like I said, there are some very like clear images of some of these big like action set pieces that live in my
Hmm.
brain. I think I love Harrison Ford. I think that like the vibe that he has is just cool because he's like kind of like rugged and strong, but also like smart and like bookish and into knowledge, and also like kind of quippy and sarcastic, which I think is that's very Harrison Ford. Like, he carries that through in like other roles. Like for example, I mentioned the show to you. I think everyone should watch it. It's called Shrinking on Apple TV, which is his most recent work. He plays a therapist. Like they work in it's about a therapy practice, and like all the therapists being like messy people with messy lives, and he's like the elder that sort of gives them advice or warnings, or tells them what they should do correctly, and certainly never kind of takes his own advice. But he's sort of very grumbly and like sarcastic and stuff in that too. And so I do think that that is like a Harrison Ford like characteristic that's like a through line for a lot of his
Okay,
his
I have to
work.
try that.
So it's a great show. It's funny and like emotional and all this kind of stuff. Like the main character is Jason Segel. He's like a widower, and
Oh,
he
okay.
sort of like
I
hits a
like him.
breaking point and starts telling his patients like exactly what he thinks. Which if you work in the mental health field, that like that is an impulse that I feel is bubbling sometimes, but you can't do it. So it's like kind of funny to watch someone sort of indulge in that impulse. But I think Harrison Ford is great in it. I won't like spoil all of his deal, but he's dealing with his own stuff, and by dealing I mean not dealing, while he's like telling other people like you got to deal with your stuff.
How
So
to deal with your stuff.
exactly, yeah, he's very funny. You get to like watch him like sing some pop tunes occasionally.
Oh, I
um
got to watch it just for that, if nothing
yeah,
else.
yeah, there's a context in which he's like in a car with another person, and they're playing their like 90s pop songs, and he starts singing. So it's very funny, but I think the Harrison Ford of it all, and I think again, if people are into the trivia of it, there's like he wasn't the first choice. Like one of the first choices was Tom Selleck, and like you get a totally different
Mm.
movie vibe with Tom Selleck. And I don't know that like the like playfulness and like quips and stuff that I really enjoy. And I think you mentioned you enjoy some of those moments. I don't know if like those would be the same without Harrison Ford. So I think that stays with me. And again, I mentioned like I enjoy the character of Indiana Jones as a hero more so than, or I guess differently than like other these franchises that have like a male hero at the center, because
Hmm.
he's got that sort of like academic side too, in addition to like the action. And he's also sort of on his own figuring things out. Whereas like, James Bond has a whole, he's MI6 and he has Q and like
Was
all of this stuff, right? And like
exactly. Yeah, he's
Ethan
got
Hunt, that's his name. I couldn't think of his name. Ethan Hunt in Mission Impossible has like they all have a whole like
team.
apparatus behind
Right.
them, right? Team and like gadgets and stuff. And Indiana Jones is like, I'm here with my gun and my whip, and I'm
Yeah.
gonna I'm gonna look around and figure out what I can do, right?
Yeah, I remember reading this in a 12th century history book, and I think I
Yes.
know where to find this. And wait a minute, and I'll pull it out. So
Yeah, yeah. I will say, can I see the only thing that I was like, this is weird when I just thought of it when you say that, sorry. When he puts the staff in and they're looking for the map to find
mm-hmm.
where the covenant is, I was like, the sun doesn't work like that. Like they were trying to make it dramatic. So the sun is like moving moving
Across
the
the
whole time, like to till it finally meets
right.
like the staff to shine the light. I was like, that's not how the sun works. The sun, obviously it was for dramatic effect, but I was like,
I was going to say, yeah. So
why is the
that's
sun moving like that?
especially that quickly. So
Right. It was like setting at like a million miles an hour. Like,
uh, uh, uh,
just like,
and
this is not,
but it stopped right at the right moment
it
when it
stopped at the right moment and didn't move
it
anymore.
it lit up the where the the well of souls was to
Yes,
be. Yeah.
yes.
So
That part I was like, come on. But obviously it was for a moment, a
yeah.
dramatic effect.
So
But yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. I even just like some of the images of it I hadn't really remembered, but like I enjoyed at the beginning that you don't see Indiana Jones's face for
oh,
until I think he like whips the gun out of the guy's hand, right? You're just seeing his back.
and that was the first advertisement for the movie, was
Mhm.
the silhouette of his back, and
Yeah.
I remember one of the things saying, "Who is Indiana Jones?"
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but you didn't even know who the actor was going to be.
That's cool. I was imagining like this would have been really cool to see, like not knowing, like for the first time. And then
It
you're like, oh my God,
was.
it's Han Solo.
Well, and that's what we all thought. It was like, oh,
Yeah,
you know, yeah,
it's Han Solo.
it's Han Solo.
Yeah,
But
and then even when he first appears in Marion's bar, right? You don't see his
mm,
face, you see his shadow, like the full
mm-hmm.
silhouette as he's like whipping the Nazis to let her go. So I think like just visuals like that are cool. And I think you see some of that. That's probably like a Spielberg thing because you see some of that like, in like Jurassic Park and that kind of
It,
thing.
he likes the shadow play, especially
Yeah.
yeah, because you brought
Something
up
like
with the
kind of
dinosaurs and so on.
like sort of creeping into frame and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God, this sort of anticipation of it. So I think that's cool. I also watching it, I was like, that first place where he got the like golden thing in Peru
Mm-hmm.
in the opening sequence, I was like, this looks familiar also. And I realized so there was a show when I was a kid. Again, this is the 90s kids will recognize this. There was a show called Legends of the Hidden Temple that was a game show. And
I
I was
know
like,
that.
and as I started thinking about it, I was like, this is like Indiana Jones in a game show. And then I looked it up and they were like, this was the inspiration, right? Because like the Olmec's temple in that, and they're always going for an artifact that's like a historical artifact. And there's like a story, and it starts with like, there's some trivia they have to know.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final like challenge is them sneaking through the hidden temple to whatever room they figure out like what room the artifact is in. And it'll be like Ben Franklin's kite or whatever, like
Oh, that's cool.
it's always like a
I remember that show though.
historical or like fake historical thing, right? And like Olmec, which is like the big like Incan head thing, tells you the story. And
Uh-huh.
then like there's a section where they answer questions on the steps of knowledge. And then like I said, the final, there's physical challenges, and then there's also that final thing where they get told what room the item is in, and there's all these different rooms with different like obstacles, right? And they give them like a suggested route, and there are temple guards that can grab them, and if you have a coin, the temple guards will let you go, or your partner has to go in. So I was like, oh, this is like when I sort of put it together, I was like, oh, this is like everything about Indiana Jones, right? Like it's the history, the artifacts, the knowledge, and also like the kind of the running, jumping
Yeah.
part of it. So yeah, it was
Um,
like I was like, oh, that is sort of a legacy of it, right? Like for my kids growing up my age, that was one of the things that we watched and loved. So I thought
but
that was I was like, oh, and then when I read on their Wikipedia page, they were like, they wanted something that was sort of like an Indiana Jones meets Jeopardy, and I was like, yeah, this is exactly that.
it spawned a couple of other, well, like I was just looking and I couldn't remember the name of the show till just now. It was Tales of the Golden Monkey, which was a TV
Mm,
show. It ran for one season, and it was a direct ripoff of
mm,
this. And then other aside, for those of you who wanted to see, who thought Tom Selleck might be a good Indiana Jones, he did a movie called High Road to China a few years later after he was able to do a movie. The reason he didn't do the movie, by the way, was because he had just done the pilot for Magnum,
yes,
and he was under contract to CBS, and CBS wouldn't let him out of the contract to do the movie. So,
yes.
but
Although
evidently he was their first choice.
then
So
I read it ended up there was an actor strike. So the timing wise, he could have done it by that
could have
point, but
done
they
it.
already had Harrison Ford. So
Right, they'd already signed him. But so would you recommend the movie then to people, like I said, the three people in our audience who haven't watched the
haven't
movie? Would
seen
you,
it.
who haven't seen
Absolutely.
it?
Yeah. I think this is for me sort of like one of the classic franchises that,
Agreed.
in the vein of like Star Wars and all of those sort of action franchises that have become big. I think this is yeah, you have to watch this movie. You should watch it. And it's like it's fun. There's action, there's a little romance, there's like history. I use that, the word lightly because it's like,
Yeah.
it's historical fiction, but like,
Mhm.
it ties in history and like real legends and like religious artifacts and stuff like that, right? Like so I think it has a little something for everybody. There is also, I'm sorry, we're wrapping up, but I have one more thing that
No,
I
no, no,
read that
you're fine.
I have
No,
to
you're
remark on. So, Marion Ravenwood and Indiana Jones, they sort of the background, right? He studied under her dad, and that they fell out because he had a relationship with Marion, who
right.
was young, is the implication, right? She's like, I was a child, it was wrong. And he's
Uh-huh.
like, you knew what you were doing. So the implication is she was a teenager or whatever. I read that when they were planning this, George Lucas wanted her to be 11 when they had
What?
a dalliance. And Steven
Really?
Spielberg was like, no, she needs to be older than that.
George Lucas wanted her to be 11 years old?
Yes. And listen,
George is George is so wrong in so many
it was
ways.
in the Wikipedia article, and it linked to like there's a I think Empire magazine did like a in 2008 it was like the full oral history of Indiana Jones. So it was all the like making
Oh,
of and stuff like that.
yeah.
It was from that. So it was in
Oh
an
gosh.
article, and I was like, so allegedly I'm citing a citation of
No,
of
no,
another
no.
citation,
I'm
but I read that and I was like, what is wrong with you, George Lucas?
yeah. I mean,
Like,
I'm
it's
like you.
bad enough when she was like, I was a child, it was wrong. I was like, but I'm like, it's the 40s. People were getting married when they were like 14, so let me
Well,
roll it back.
I was gonna give her the benefit of the doubt, say maybe she was 16 or 17,
Yeah,
and and
that's
maybe he
it's
was like
we're gonna
a
go by
22-year old,
it's just sort of the traveling pants age
right.
gaps, right? It's Lena and Costas, it's Bridget and Hot Coach
Hmm.
Eric. That's where we're at.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was like, George Lucas wanted her to be 11 and
So he
him to
was,
be much older. I was like, what is wrong with
yeah,
you?
and Indy couldn't have said you knew what you were doing, not if she was 11 years old.
11. Yeah, so
Please.
they
Well,
maybe
thank God they changed that
thank goodness.
storyline.
Well, so George Lucas, like him and Philip Kaufman came up with the idea, but Lawrence Kasdan wrote it. So maybe Lawrence Kasdan was like, no,
No, we're not
I'm
doing
not
that.
doing that.
No,
No.
yeah,
Lawrence
no.
Kasdan, who wrote the best Star Wars movie and also wrote The Bodyguard, starring Whitney Houston.
I did not know that.
Wikipedia, man. I'm learning so much.
Did he also do Silverado?
That I don't know. I wrote down some, and it was just ones that I recognized. So
Yeah.
I will tell you, he wrote Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, The Force Awakens, and Solo: A Star Wars Story. He wrote, obviously, Raiders of the Lost Ark. He wrote The Bodyguard. He wrote and directed The Big Chill.
Those are classics.
He wrote and directed The Accidental Tourist. And when Steven Spielberg picked him to write this, he'd
Hmm.
only been writing for like a month.
Really?
Yeah, like this, he was a screenwriter for like a month. So
Um,
this is new Lawrence Kasdan. Can you imagine?
yeah. Well, he did a great Silverado.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Man, he did a lot of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think even like obviously Steven Spielberg and George Lucas are the big names, but like Lawrence Kasdan did a ton of stuff. Philip Kaufman did The Right Stuff. He wrote and directed The Right Stuff
Yeah,
and The Unbearable Lightness of Being. He did the remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers from the late 70s. So like none of these people are like
that's a good movie.
slacking. But
He
yeah,
also
no.
did.
Oh, I was so surprised to see The Bodyguard. I was like, imagine writing all these Star Wars
I
movies
know.
and then writing like a Whitney Houston movie, which we will be talking about at some point because that's definitely on my list. I was raised by a dad who was a fan of the divas, as in like, VH1 Divas Live. So
Oh, okay.
we definitely watched The Bodyguard many times.
Well, because that'll be one then we'll be able to discuss in detail because that is one of my favorite movies as
Oh,
well.
good. Good.
So, and then,
Yes.
yeah, so, and for a lot of reasons. I'm
Hmm.
not a big, huge Kevin Costner fan, but I do
Hmm.
think that's one of his better movies.
Yeah. Yeah,
And I think, for, we'll talk about it, but,
for
I
sure.
think both performers do a really good job and it's a great story.
Yes. And like one of the best soundtracks of any
Oh,
movie ever of
definitely.
all. I think it's like still the
Easily,
best selling soundtrack of all time. But it's
easily.
definitely the
So,
best one. One of the
yeah.
best ones. So, all
Hmm.
right. Well, any final thoughts about Raiders of the Lost Ark?
Again, you reiterated everything that I said. If you haven't by some chance not watched the movie, or if it's been a while and you become jaded by some of the newer movies or the movie experience, and you just want something that's enjoyable, that's fun, that's going to just take you to places. It does have great locations and so on and so
Mhm.
forth. The cinematography is really, really good. I swear, if it ever came out in a big theater again, I'd go see it in a heartbeat.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
but yeah, if you get a chance, sit down for a couple of hours, get yourself a big bowl of popcorn, and just just let yourself go, and then be taken away by the magic of the movie, and enjoy yourself, and just sort of go back into either your childhood or your young adulthood or whatever it may be, and
Mhm.
just go on a ride, and just let them get you there. So
And if you're into the male persuasion, take a look at young Harrison Ford. He got really in shape for this movie. He did a lot of working out. Enjoy the work he did in all senses.
very good. Okay, I like that. So
There we go. All right. Well, with that, please subscribe to some of our parts wherever you get your podcasts. You can leave us a review. Hopefully, it's a nice one. If not, maybe you can just write it in your diary or something.
you
You
can
can
follow
also
us.
follow us on Instagram at Some of Our Parts Pod. I'll include the link in the description.
And if anyone has any recommendations of a movie they'd like us to review, we'd be
Mhm.
more than glad to entertain that. We're certainly, not objectionable to that. So please let us know if you have a movie that you think is a hidden gem that you'd like us to take a look at.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can get a couple different perspectives on it. So, reach out to us through the Instagram or in the reviews or comments on Apple or Spotify, and we'll definitely take a look. And with that, bye bye.
Take care.